Hey everybody, I'm Taylor Fairbank, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my accidental supply chain, and sharing my story of how I went from open source software maintainer to humanitarian aid worker. I use he, him pronouns. You can find me on Twitter at borderless_dev. You can find Distribute Aid on most social media at Distribute Aid. So before we begin, just a few quick content warnings. We do discuss difficult topics about refugee aid work. We're only going to show safe for work images of that work, though. And there will be some text and oral content describing aid responses. There will also be truckfuls of awesomeness and a lot of hope and joy. But if you feel like you need to, now is a great time to take an early lunch break and get ready for the next talk. Also can recommend reaching out to crisistextline.org if you ever need to chat with somebody. So without further ado, there and back again. One does not simply walk into aid tech. A little bit of prehistory here. I call it the before times. I have a computer science background. I did all my coding courses at the University of Illinois' comp sci program, and then I dropped out to start my first startup and got into Y Combinator. That failed, and Trump got elected in the same year. 2016, early 2017, rough time in my life. So I made it out to Europe to crash with a friend, Sarah, who's now my co-founder. And I was pretty bored, which led me to get involved with the local refugee aid group, gathering clothes, sorting t-shirts, making pallets. It was a pretty cool setup they had. And Sarah got involved, and she, saw the need, for some help aid matching. We have all this great community stuff. Where do we get it to? And with the logistics side, have any of you ordered an 18-wheeler to come pick up 25 pallets? Like, neither had we, right? And so after talking to a bunch of other refugee aid groups in summer of 2018, we did a little Eurorail trip and talked to 35 aid groups in 7 countries. We decided to start Distribute Aid. It was like all positive response, and also, can you solve these other problems? So we felt confident in taking a shot and doing our own thing. Maybe a good time to pause and describe what Distribute Aid is and what we do. We take a needs-first approach and work with grassroots community collection partners to gather aid, bring it to a staging hub. It's about 66% of our aid that we deliver. We also work with manufacturers and connect those to community orders. And we work with corporations that want to make in-kind donations of leftover products. This is all brought to receiving hubs in different countries, where our grassroots distribution partners split up the aid amongst themselves and get it to people in need. We have most experience with refugees and other displaced people, but our supply chains are not limited to responding in those contexts. At the very end, we close the loop by gathering feedback and news from our frontline partners, and then beginning the next one with updated needs assessments, outreach, and planning. This is an example of the result of our work in action. Here we have Lifting Hands international volunteers unloading a shipment that their primary hub in Utah sent with Distribute Aid to their frontline project in Ceres, Greece. We also are creating open source logistics aid tech software. I think our kind of best thing in production right now is our needs assessment survey software and the visualizations that we have and the data insights that we get from it. And part of this journey is for me moving away from open source to humanitarian aid work, and why we made that decision. But we are excited to be ramping up our open source efforts again after a couple of years on focusing on the supply chain challenges. Give you a sense of our scale. Last year's annual report, we had 32 aid shipments delivering about $15 million worth of aid to meet over 1 million needs, and we worked with 142 different organizations. Since then, we've doubled the number of shipments that we do. So check back in a few months when this year's annual report is out, and I have all those wonderful stats. Getting into the kind of more recent arc of this journey, I would not recommend that you try this at home. I'm not sure I would recommend that I would try this at home if I had a time machine and could talk to myself. There was a very young, very naive tailor in 2018 that said, let's build some grassroots aid tech. We tested it out summer of the next year. Great feedback. This is awesome, but I need you to help me get this container from England to Greece next month. Not build some software that's going to solve my problem 6 months down the road. It's good that we got into supply chain operations because COVID happened in 2020. We happened to have the very first grassroots COVID shipment with 200,000 bars of soap arriving in Greece the day of the first COVID case in Greece. So there's enough time to do an emergency distribution in the camps before everyone got locked out. We continued to keep key air routes open during COVID, using commercial freight services and helping grassroots groups work together to access those at a commercial scale in order to cover routes that were previously serviced by vans and other informal transportation methods. Supply chain challenges continued to hit the world. There was the Beirut port blast. Brexit is a huge thing in 2021. COVID continues to be an issue. But by 2022, we figured out how to make our operations financially and ecologically sustainable. So that's kind of on lock right now. And in 2023, it's supposed to say 2023 at the bottom there, it's time to dust off those repos. We're getting back into those open source tech ideas that we had building off our existing projects like the needs assessment. So here's an example. It's one of the trucks of soap we sent to Greece. It goes to an aid distribution warehouse like this, and then it gets distributed in refugee camp environments, border squats, and border regions, and distros to support houseless folks, other folks living in cities. But yeah, we help people make sure their basic human needs are met. So that's the first half. It's time to grab some more popcorn if you want. We're about to get into the lessons learned. I love the parallels between grassroots humanitarian aid and open source tech communities. They're both different types of solidarity economies. They're both often driven by volunteers. They almost certainly involve underpaid, overworked organizers and maintainers. And I hope to open a dialogue between grassroots aid groups and technology enthusiasts, see what happens when you put two great things in a room together. So that's me. This is fine. Humanity's going to win. Things are a little bit stressful, but that's where I'm at. And one of the issues is that 60% of maintainers are unpaid hobbyists. 77% of them want to get paid. Almost every technology company out there uses open source software, yet the majority of maintainers are unpaid. It's not financially sustainable for them. We know that more pay for open source maintainers means more people get to spend more time on open source projects. And just like aid workers, we don't have the time to do more. We're already up to the brim with real tasks and responsibilities. Burnout is a real thing. So we need your help. We need industry help, and we need the government to understand how open source technology works so they don't accidentally criminalize it in the name of whatever they're doing. I love this quote from Pinboard, the programmer's credo. We do these things not because they are easy, because we thought they were going to be easy. So speaking to all the maintainers in the room, on the pay me side, you can take some actions to make it easier for folks to get you money, right? Let's reduce that friction. Let's think a little bit like a business, even if it's just a hobby project or some cool tech thing we hack on the side. For any new open source projects, I highly recommend getting set up with the Open Source Foundation on the Open Collective platform. This is something that will give you financial and legal protections and allow you to set up both donations and invoices. Invoices are super important. Companies are used to receiving invoices and bills and paying those. They're used to sending invoices and getting paid. And if you can make it so that you can just look like any other service provider that they have or vendor that they have and get your open source contribution on a line item in a budget, that's a really good way of facilitating corporate sponsorships. Sure, have the donation channel and offer a tax write-off, but it's also fine to just say, you use our software, you maybe want some support, or you just want to contribute to the community. I can bill you $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 a month, whatever you can negotiate. Make friends in high places, make some friends in big tech. Google has a wonderful donation matching program. Most big technology companies do. And I feel like we should really all be trying to max that out to support open source maintainers, as well as other community aid projects, whether that's in the physical world or online. Companies really should be automating their dependency donations. That's a super easy win. But I need y'all to think about tech outside, like open source technology outside tech for tech, right? So a lot of the popular projects I see are libraries, their frameworks, their languages, their services geared toward technologists. There's tooling, there's testing. Distribute aid is never going to get 1,000 stars on GitHub, but we're building open source tech. It's just not visible or as visible because it's designed to help grassroots aid workers. It's not something that a lot of other people in our industry are going to be exposed to or build off of or what have you. So yeah, let's get our maintainers of our dependencies paid, but let's go above and beyond that, right? And dream big. I really, I'm almost like personally offended by this XKCD showing all modern digital infrastructure. And then there's one tiny little Jenga block that's a project some random person in Nebraska has been thanklessly maintaining since 2003. I feel this one. Those are some good ways. Like, we all have responsibilities in this ecosystem, but unfortunately, folks don't play nice all the time. And I love encouraging grassroots communities to stand up and show their worth and know their worth. So my philosophy personally is, as the perspective of an open source project maintainer, if you're a company, I don't care about your bottom line. I don't care about your tech supply chain. I don't care about your government security requirements. I care about people. I care about people's data and privacy. I care about building functionality that supports people getting together and bringing communities together. I'm not building this tech for other companies to use. And I know that we're in some like humanitarian aid niche, but I think that a lot of maintainers out there are making open source projects to scratch an itch, to try out an idea, and then a lot of companies start using it, right? Corporate abuse is real. Open source software is as is. If you want a warranty, pay us, right? But without that, we can use the power of technology supply chain attacks to have some fun and call out bad corporate behavior. So I'm not saying anyone should do anything illegal. Talk to your lawyer first. I'm not a lawyer. Don't do anything unethical. But I love this example by the oatmeal. Back in the day, the Huffington Post was hot linking to images on the oatmeal's website and in comics, kind of linking them into the articles. And so this was driving up their server costs to an unmaintainable level. And the folks running the oatmeal kept the URLs, but replaced the images that were being served with a bit of a cheeky little call out, identifying the bad behavior and then asking for reparations, asking for the company to hold themselves accountable and cover the increase in the AWS bill. So you can have fun, and you don't owe a company anything unless they're willing to pay you. I think there are some important licensing considerations. In our own kind of open source tech, we are trying to make it really easy for anybody to build off of and contribute to and adapt to their own needs, but realize there might be some commercial value here. So again, just making it easy for businesses to have a reason to pay you. If you're making content, I really like the Creative Commons by NC-SA. And so that's by is the attribution. People have to link back, shout you out if they're building off your work. NC is non-commercial. I'll get into why that's important in a minute here. And then SA is the share alike. It's that copyleft, right? We can all build out together in public together. That non-commercial bit means that people can't take your work and profit off of it, and not kind of contribute back, right? If you're a hobbyist, I'd look into ethical open source licenses. I think that these are interesting. They haven't been tested in court, so not everything in them, may hold up. And that's why we're not using an ethical source license at Distribute Aid. But if it's just a smaller project or a fun open source project, do be aware of them. If you're running an indie startup or service, not startup, if you're running an indie service, that's kind of what Distribute Aid is like. And so we use the AGPL. I love how much it scares companies, right? They won't touch it, but the key thing is, same thing with this content, the non-commercial clause, offer custom licensing. Here's a really hard copyleft approach, and then we're willing to work with corporate partners, right? Maybe a supply chain tech startup that wants to use some of our aid tech in a commercial context. That's awesome. Let's write a custom license. Let's build in support to that. Pay us money for our work. And then I think there's a lot of innovation happening with startups using different types of open core models. So GitLab was in my Y Combinator batch. I think they have a really interesting approach to that, which is a bit more of the open core enterprise services. I'm also liking what I'm seeing from Gatsby and Netlify. Here's the framework, and then kind of dev tooling and services. There's definitely ways to commercialize open source work. Although I like to hang out at the hobbyist or indie service level. In order to use these strategies effectively, you'll need to get contributor agreements that assign copyright to the project. So it's important that, there's some solid ethical stewardship of these things, but I would get those in place. Very hard to do custom licensing if you need sign off from 100 random contributors over the past 3 years. And again, recommend Open Collective since there's oversight and accountability and transparency around how that money for the project is being used, which make people feel more comfortable assigning their copyright back to the project. Solidarity matters. Communities are complex, adaptive systems, and they often outlive projects, platforms, companies, you name it. So I think that how we treat each other along the way matters. And this happens in the grassroots aid world all the time. New projects start, old projects end, but the people stay together. People take a break, but they're going to come back. They're gonna keep caring. So open source is the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful solidarity economy in the world. How do we be more than just tech? How can open source as a solidarity economy support grassroots mutual aid as a solidarity economy? And then in return, how can grassroots mutual aid help, with recent events like massive layoffs for tech workers, right? And be kind of providing that baseline community support. For better or worse, tech changes the world. Following orders is no excuse. So be mindful of what you're doing for work. Be aware of how it impacts other people around the world. And if you're spending your free time doing free labor, working on that hobby project, or trying to make a big effort of your own. Try to be mindful of what sort of impact you're going to be making. This is why I love community so much. This is a great example. There's this cooking project in Athens called Steps. Every Wednesday at a local public park, they just cook out in the square, in the open. And all these other community services use that as an opportunity to engage and participate. So you can see some of the soap that we sipped being handed out there next to the tea station. There's mobile laundry units that show up. The local barber gives free haircuts. Medical teams roll in, do some basic health checks. And at the end of the day, everyone sits down together, regardless of who you are or why you're there, and shares a nice, fresh meal. So, I don't know. I deal with a lot of bad things in the world. It's pretty awful sometimes, but the world we can build is worth it. A little bit of calls to action at the end here. If you want to support open source maintainers, truck you, pay us. Keep an eye out for junior devs and definitely celebrate non-code contributors. Advocate for better OSS programs at your workplace. Let's get some more 20% time supporting projects, but let's also get some more funding. Abuse those donation matching programs. They're so good. How do we max them out? Like, I'll give you money to give it back to me, and then just clear the corporate match, right? Come on, let's make something happen, and connect open source to other solidarity economies. There is one thing that I would like to talk about from my perspective as an international refugee aid worker, which is that there are members of the open source community that live under oppressive regimes and are impacted in ways that most of the rest of us are not. So I know that it can be difficult and dangerous, for example, to use GitHub if you're in Iran. I've heard that. What concerns me is that recently the core JS maintainer is in Russia, had some legal issues, and then sanctions dropped the financial support for them as a solo maintainer from $2,000 a month to $500 a month. Core.js is used by every single one of the top 50 websites in the world. And so that is obviously a very nuanced and tricky situation for international companies to navigate, because it's important to comply with sanctions. Do not comply with sanctions. But it highlights the fragility of some of our open source ecosystems, and the fact that there wasn't more support, and the fact that this wasn't something that people picked up on early, I think is a real problem. So how to support aid workers? Truck you, pay us. Connect with your local mutual aid groups. Pick 2 crises to care about, one short term, one long term. Make principled donations to grassroots orgs. I know there's criticisms of donating money to large charities. I promise you the small grassroots, mutual aid stuff is legit. We stretch those dollars far. And if you have the time, contribute to open source outside of Tech for Tech. If you have extra electronics, most of my friends have devices that look like this. We also use hardware to support people, provide them the ability to reach their friends and family back home, to coordinate, connect with each other, and a good charging station or mobile Wi-Fi station always helps keep the crowd calm, so that other people engaging in other services have a calm and safe environment. So let us know. We got some laptops lying around. And that's a good pitch. If you want to get involved with Distribute Aid, truck you, pay us. We're looking for a maintainer for our needs assessment project. We're also looking for mentors and subject matter experts for our first Dev Champions program cohort. We love non-code contributors as well. So it's plenty of ways to get involved with our open source efforts, even if you're not looking to contribute code. And we have great corporate partnership opportunities. Just hit us up. You know where to reach me. Finally, there's something that's happened this week that just came to my attention before recording this talk. One of our volunteers has been arrested in connection to social work that she was doing. It's not related to her work with Distribute Aid at all, but we are concerned that the government is using state repression to silence social workers and aid workers. So I think by the time this talk airs, we'll have an official statement out on our social media channels, and please do take a look for that. This is important, and we are asking the community to support our volunteer. More information to follow. Cool. Thank y'all, and have a great day. Look forward to hearing from you. And yeah, let me know if you want to volunteer at a warehouse, touch some grass, get out there in the field.